Hi, welcome back. This video is going to be a how-to. Now, I'm going to give you a little heads up on this. This is going to be to remove the rear axle out of a Daytona. This is a particular car is an 86 Turbo Z. The reason I'm removing the rear axle is because I have a customer on their way to pick up the entire rear axle. Typically when these cars go out of here, when we park these cars out, I pull the hubs and the spindles, but normally not the whole rear axle. I've got a couple here from other cars that haven't sold, so I don't know. If I had more room, I would definitely be keeping them all, because what they're known to do is where the coil spring sits on the pocket of the rear axle, especially the northern cars, they're known for getting rust, and the spring will literally blow through the perch and sag. Then you can either plate it or replace it. But this gentleman asked me for this part, and we're going to get it out. Now, back to the original statement of when we normally pull these parts, I don't care about putting it back together. I'm going to try and show you the proper steps and not the steps I do. Because again, once this car is on the trailer and I get it up in the air, and I remove the rear hubs and the rear spindles, so we're going to cut brake lines, we're going to cut the parking brake cables, we're going to cut all that because we're not putting it back together. If you're doing an axle swap where you need to replace your entire rear axle, then obviously there's going to be a few extra steps because you're going to need to remove those without breaking them. But for this video, I'll try to go over what to remove when it comes to that, but that's not how we do it when we're stripping one down. With that said, I'm going to start with a list of tools. These are the tools that I know offhand what I need. I may have forgot one or two, so we'll go over that as we go. Your basic common hand tools is all you need. There's nothing special. Some things make it easier than others, but if you have a ratchet and regular hand tools, you can do this. You might have to struggle a little bit, but it can be done. So I know that I didn't get a particular wrench. I don't remember what size, because like I said, typically we don't pull the whole rear axle. But we're going to work on that. We're going to do that now. So obviously the first thing you're going to need is a jack and, jack stands. When I have these cars on my trailer, I don't normally use a jack stand because I'll just take off one wheel at a time. I'll do this side, take the wheel off, but I'll have a cement block sitting in front here, because like I said before, all I'm after is the hub and the spindle. So it's literally sitting this high off the block, and once I get everything off that I need, set it on the cement block, and that's where it stays until we strap it down and it goes over the scale and whatnot. But for this video, since I'm removing the entire rear axle, and actually what's going to end up happening is once he gets here and that's all squared away, I have to make this car a roller again. Currently, we don't have any way of loading this car on a trailer without rear wheels. I don't have a tow motor or a tractor or whatever, so I will back my trailer up to this door and hook to the rear of the car, drag it up on the trailer. Then I can remove the other rear axle again. So again, I'm putting jack stands underneath it. That's the proper way of doing it. That's the way you should do it, especially if you're going to be underneath the car. And that's how we're going to do it now. I have a 1/2 inch impact. This is a special socket. I don't know, special, but that is universal. It's got 2 different sizes for lug nuts. And I use the snot out of this thing, and it works very well. And I've had it for a long time. I have your standard deep well 1/2 inch drive impact sockets. I have a 1/2 inch 15 millimeter regular socket. I'll get into why we use this instead of the impact socket at a later point. Then I have just your regular pry bars. Those are mostly to get the drum loose from the shoes. A lot of times on these older cars, they're kind of stuck, so you have to pry it to get the drum off. And then I have a regular pair of channel locks, and I might have to get a bigger pair. I just grab this one. This is a small pair. That I use on the nut, the bearing retainer nut. Typically, they're not on super tight. You're not supposed to have them on super tight. So normally, I can get a pair of channel locks and just give it a quick twist, and then it comes apart. A flat blade screwdriver, just any regular flat blade screwdriver. And typically, what I use this for is the cotter pin that goes through the castle part of the nut, and just to bend the tabs, back out of the way. And then I have just a pair of regular cutters. What I do, and I'll show you in the video, is I actually hook this part in the eye of the cotter pin and then use the hammer just to kind of tap it to help guide it out. I found that works best. That's just me personally. You may have a different experience. You use whatever works best for you to remove that. And then a hammer to do hammer things, because sometimes you get aggravated and you need to hit something. So, anyhow, first step that I always like to do is I always like to try to at least break the lug nuts free. Now, typically my impact does not have an issue busting any of the lug nuts free, but like all of us that have ever worked on a car, sometimes you're going to have one lug nut that's just going to be a stubborn pain in the butt. So you got to get the breaker bar, and if the tire's up off the ground, all it's going to do is spin. So you leave the weight on the car and just break them free. I'm not taking them all the way off. We're just going to break them free just so that we can spin them. So let me do that real quick, and then we'll come back. All right, you can see I got the wheel off. I got the other side off too. I just went and knocked that out. Jack stand on this side, jack stand on the other side, and this car's up quite a ways. There's about, 20 inches, give or take, between the bottom of the bumper and the ground. And when I brought the jack out from underneath it, boy, that rear axle dropped where the tire was only a couple inches off the ground. So keep that in mind when you're doing this, that it's going to sag, once you get the jack out from underneath the axle. I didn't notice it before until just now. This car's got a broken rear spring. See, it's just flopping around. So, wasn't aware that that was going to be part of the problem, but that's okay. He doesn't want the springs, so we're not worried about that. They'll just go inside the car and be considered weight. So, the next step that I do is you're going to want to take this dust cap off. You can typically get a screwdriver kind of in behind here, and what I'll do is tap this with a hammer, and then it'll walk it off. I'm going to try to do a video of that. Alright, so I'm going to apologize while I'm doing this that my video quality may not be the greatest. I use my phone, and I'm doing this by myself. I don't have somebody, standing there holding the camera while I'm trying to do everything that I can. And sorry if my knee gets in the way. So, dust cap comes off. This is where you got your cotter pin. It goes through here, and it goes through the spindle. So when I was saying earlier, you find the ends, you take your screwdriver, and you just kind of give it a little pry. And then I'll take the sharp side of that cutter, the snap, comes right out, and there's your cotter pin. Okay, you're going to throw that away and you put a new one in when you replace it. And this is the castle part of the nut. This is where the cotter pin goes through, and that's what holds everything in place. And then you got your big nut. Now this one's not even tight, obviously. I would turn it straight off with my finger. You can reuse the nut. I'm hoping this is getting on video. Can't tell. You can reuse the nut, clean it up, and put it back on when you're ready to go. So, and behind the nut is a big washer, and it's got a notch in it that slides through this groove right here. There's a groove right here that this washer will slide into. You can either pry it out now if you really want to fight with it, or it'll slide out once you start sliding the drum out. When Chrysler built these cars originally and were selling, if you went to this parts counter and was ordering a hub and drum, if you look in the parts books, the drum and the hub is one part number. You have to use a press, which I have, and then you press the hub out of the drum. That's the way they were designed. That's the way it goes. Now, if you went to the parts store and you ordered a drum, you're not going to get the hub. You would just get the drum. So, I don't know. It's the way they did it. When you look up part numbers, you're going to get a hub and drum is one assembly, and that's the part number. Go to any regular parts store, you can get just the drum. A lot of times, like I said earlier, you're going to need to take a pry bar, just kind of get back in here. And again, if you're reusing everything, you're going to be a little more gentle. Typically, like I said earlier, when we're doing this, we're not caring about the condition of the backing plate because we're not normally taking the backing plate. So since this gentleman's buying the entire rear axle, I'm going to try to be a little more careful with the backing plate. You can see the washer's already kind of slid out. Well, I had it. And sometimes they'll slide out and then slide right back in. So you just work with it a little bit and it'll come out. It's just my fingers not wanting to work. There it comes. So you can see that there's this, it's hard to see because it's greasy, but there's a notch right here at the top. That's the notch that slides into this groove, and that just prevents this washer from walking as the car's moving and everything else. So let me see if I can get this drum off, and we'll go from there. Sometimes you gotta, my hands are greasy, I should have a rag. Let me find one. Alright, got a rag. So this is where you let the hammer do hammer things. He's kind of pop this back in here. Now, the mechanical way you should do this is, move the adjuster, the brake adjuster, down. I don't ever take the time to do that. I just work it around, and eventually it will pop off. Sometimes they fight you a lot harder than others times. This one probably shouldn't be too bad because this car was a driver within the last, I'd say, year that it was on the road. And there's your drum and your hub. So you can see it's all kind of pressed in there in one unit. This is the hub, this back part, and then the drum. And then this is your outer bearing. This bearing's been replaced, I think, yeah. Because typically a factory bearing would have a plastic where the rollers ride in. This one doesn't have that. So that tells me that it's been replaced at some point in time in its life. So now you can see that we have the backing plate and the shoes exposed. This is where we're getting to. This is our next step. Now, we're going back to this conventional 15 millimeter socket. The experience that I have found is that a 15 millimeter impact socket will not clear. If you can see this bolt, it will not clear between the bolt and the spindle because the sidewall is too thick. Now, I know you're not supposed to use an impact on a chrome socket, but guess what we're going to do? We're going to use an impact on a chrome socket. Put an extension on to bring it out a little bit, and 4 of those bolts, 1 in each corner, will remove the backing plate from the axle. I have had these in the past where they were so rusty that when you run them out, they snap. So be careful of that. If it starts to bind up on you, run it back in, get some penetrating oil or whatever you prefer, and then run it out. So you got 4 of these, 4 bolts. That holds the backing plate to the rear axle. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hold up, because I got ahead of myself because I'm used to not worrying about this. Now, when we're parking one of these cars, I'll bring my cutoff wheel right here and just cut that parking brake cable and leave it in the backing plate. And actually, I won't even cut the parking brake cable unless I'm keeping the backing plate. If I'm not keeping the backing plate, then I just leave it hang, and I'll come in here and pop. Right now at this point, I'll take the 4 bolts out, and this backing plate will slide off, and that spindle pops out the back side, and then I just leave it hang. Goes across the scale, it's gone. But for your purposes, if you're replacing this, my recommendation is undo the brake line like you're supposed to, undo the parking brake. The parking brake can be kind of a pain. because it's really difficult to see. I have a little light here. See if I can get this light to show you why it's kind of a pain. And I'm trying to look at the camera from behind it here and be able to show you what I'm talking about. If you look, there's fingers that stick up. So this parking brake cable will slide through the backing plate, and then those fingers pop up, and that holds it in place. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to, I don't know what I just did about that. You're going to need to get in here with something and push these fingers down to get this cable to slide back towards the front of the car. That can be a task. I will admit, this parking brake cable is already cut or broke here. I don't know if you can see it, but it ends right below the spindle, so it's already not hooked up. So we're not going to be too concerned about that. We're going to go ahead and cut it here on the other side, so we can slip it out of the rear axle. So when the gentleman comes, he doesn't have to mess with it. He's going to have to replace it anyways, because it's already broken. So we're going to go that route. Try to set this up so you can see my tripod doesn't go down any lower, I don't think. Yeah, it does. There it goes. So finish removing this last bolt. Gotta use the impact, made it a little quicker, but that's okay. And then that just drops down. And like I said, we're not worried about the brake lines, so we'll just cut them. Oh, cut. And then this thing is almost free. We'll cut this with the cut-off wheel here in a little bit and get that out of the way. So the next step, again, you're going to go. Well, the next step is you're going to go to the other side. We're not going to do the other side right this second because I want to try to show you what else needs done. If you look, if you look at the bottom of the shock, you can see there's the end of a bolt. That bolt will come off from the other side. Put an impact on it and run it out. I think it's an 18 millimeter. I could be mistaken. It might be a 15. I'd have to double check. And that will remove the shocks from the rear axle. You're going to do that on both sides. You also want to watch. I would probably spray it with some penetrating oil, just because how much rust and crud there is. It may snap off on you. I've had that happen on Omnis, and then it's a fight to get it out of there. You can succeed, but it is a fight. You're also going to need to remove the track bar, which is the long bar that runs from driver to passenger side. And I think we're going to do that on the driver's side, because I'll get underneath the car and show you. Alright, so I'm underneath the back of the car. This is the track bar. This bar here, it runs from driver to passenger side. This is still available, the last time I checked, from about any of the parts warehouses or whatever. So you can replace this bolt, and there's another bolt on the other side, and that will come out. This gentleman wants the entire thing, so we're going to leave this attached here because there's no point in messing with it. But he wants the rear axle, so now you're going to want to take this bar and follow it up to the bottom of the car. About the center towards the driver's side, there's a nut. We're going to need to take that nut out to allow this bar to drop. And then if you go on to the outside of the driver's side and look right here, there's two bolts. That connects this bracket to the frame rail of the car. Now, once that's done, you're going to go in the front of the rear tires and remove the 6 bolts from that. And I'll show you what those are once we get that far. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and pop this other side hub off. And I could do that after the axle's on the ground. It's not that big of a deal either way. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it now so that it's done. And yeah. So this, real quick off the subject, this is my first time underneath this car. I knew the car was rusty, and of course you've had that. I've had the people, well, why are you parting it, and this, that, and the other, and understand when we get these cars, if it's a car, sorry about that, if it's a car we're saving, I will do my best to find it a good home. We are not going to save the cars ourselves because that's just not what we do. But I will do my best to find the car a good home. I have a car here right now that's been here for 1.5 years, trying to find it a good home. And unfortunately for the car, its time's about up. But this car, I don't know how well you can see it. That is almost all carpet. From the rear seat forward, and the driver's side is, you probably can't see it too well. The driver's side is worse. I'll get out from back out from under here, and I'll show you. All right, so this is the bottom of this car, and starting right about here, you can see where it ends. Okay, from there back, yeah, it's crunchy a little, but it's probably fairly solid. But that is behind the front seat. So that's at the footwell, just a little bit in front of the footwell of the rear seat floor. The front seat bracket is right about here. So picture that. It's actually behind where the bracket sits. And I know it's hard to see with the light, but that's the rocker. The rocker panel is non-existent. The intersection part of the rocker panel is just about non-existent. My light is not cooperating. You move forward, there's just nothing. Here's the front floor that somebody's already put galvanized, looks like galvanized steel in there. Here's where some of the, I don't even know what this is, some kind of wiring goes through. It's just gone. Here's the front frame rail. Now, I'm sure it's fixable. Anything's fixable. I've seen them take, other cars that are way worse than this and, invested tens of thousands of dollars in man hours and labor and parts and things. And, it could be fixed. But back to what I've said before, where does it stop? How much money do you invest in this car? Like, it's hard to see from over here. The rear seat floor, my thumb and finger right in the way. The rear seat floor is rotted away on the passenger side, and it runs all the way up darn near to the front. There's more rust than solid. So that's why we're doing this. That's why this car's getting parted. The gentleman we got it from knew that. He'd owned the car for a long time, but he knew what was going to happen to it. And honestly, that was his recommendation, that the car was just too far gone. This one here needs quarters, wheel wells. It's a hot mess. So it's going to go to save many other cars. But anyways, back to the task at hand. You crawl up under here. See those 2 bolts right there in the picture? Those are 2 of the bolts that you're going to need to remove. Once you get that far, those are going to drop the front part of the rear axle. And then there's a third one kind of hidden. My light won't come any further. I don't have enough. I didn't drag enough wire out. There's a third one up in here. There, you can kind of see it. It's right here. That also is going to come out. And that's what's going to allow the front part of the axle to drop. But let me, we'll get to that. So here's one I've actually never had happen. I got the drum loose from the shoes, and the drum came off from the hub. Remember I said earlier that you normally have to press those off. This one I didn't have to. So this drum has probably been replaced at some point in time. I would say probably within the last couple of years. The shoes actually look pretty thick. So we're going to continue, and I just wanted to show you that. All right, so I went ahead and got these 2 bolts loose. I just kind of hand threaded them back in so they're not, so that if this thing does size to fall, it just doesn't fall, come crashing down. But I'm going to get the shocks out next. I am going to spray those just to try to be a little safer, and so they don't, I hope they don't snap. If they snap off in this nut, this nut's part of this bracket. It doesn't spin, I don't recall. just to try to keep it from snapping off, you know, on the end. So let me grab that, and I'll see if I can get one of them out. All right, so it came out pretty easily. I had to take the ratchet or impact on the back side and get it to fit in here because it didn't want to clear between the track bar and the axle. But here's the bolt. You can see it's a pretty long bolt, and it goes through this eyelet. Oh, losing my light. Goes through this eyelet, through the shock, and then out through this other side into this nut it is attached to this tab, so it doesn't go anywhere. So I'm going to go to the other side and get that shock bolt out, and then we'll carry on, and I'll work on getting this big nut right up there. That'll be the next one that I get out, and that should, and I say should, doesn't mean it will, but it should lower this rear axle down, and then all I got to do is go to the front part, and then it's out. I told the gentleman that's buying this I could have this axle out in 15 minutes, and I could if I wasn't doing this video, but I'm trying to help you guys out. I know, again, I said earlier, it's not the greatest quality, but I work with what I have. It's darker on this side of the garage because the other side is where I normally do this at, and I have it set up with a bunch of LED lights and whatnot. But unfortunately, there's another car over there, that 85 Turbo Z, that is occupying the space that I normally work in. So, work with what you got. That's how I believe it. Do what you can with what you have. So let me get the other shock out, and we'll go from there. All right, so those are both out. There's the second one. Those are 15 millimeter, and I was able to get the impact. It would go up through here like that, and got on that one there pretty easily. Grab my pry bar real quick here and show you that the shock is now loose from the axle. You can see the axle is already starting to drop, and it could come down further, but I gotta get that other bolt apart that I showed you there near the gas tank. So we'll get that one out. The other shocks already kind of popped out of the tab as well. So really all that's holding it together now on the rear part of the axle is that bolt that runs up along that bracket that you can see right here. So I get that nut off and then finish removing those two bolts on the side. This thing should be about ready to drop, and then, like I said, we'll go to the front part of the axle, the trailing arm, or whatever you want to call it, and we'll get those 6 bolts out, and the axle's on the ground. So let's get it done. All right, that nut is out. That was an 18 millimeter. So here's the nut. It just came right off, and it looks like it's knurled, which is kind of interesting. It should be able to get up there with a pry bar and kind of work that down. I'm going to see if I can do it while I'm doing the video. It should pop down. I don't know, it might not. It might fight me. But we'll work on it. It'll come to, I'll win. Just got to figure it out. So let me go, I'm going to remove these other 2 bolts that attach to the side of the frame rail, finish removing those, and hopefully that gets this to fall. Alright, rear axle is on the ground. Those 3 bolts on each side came out. They were 15 millimeter. They came right out. You can see it dropped all the way down to the ground. The only thing left holding it together is the track bar still, which I got that bolt on that side loose, or out. It should, again say should, slide out. And then all I got left to do is worry about how to get, I still haven't figured out how to get this bar that runs up to the bottom by the gas tank out. But I wanted to get the rear axle out, I think, so it'll make some room so I can get under the pry bar or whatever. That is one piece of the rear axle I've never removed, but the gentleman wants it. So we're going to get it. Just got to figure out how. We're going to come up in here and, like I said earlier, cut the parking brake cables. We'll cut the rubber hose here for the brakes because, well, yeah, this bracket should be attached somehow, but it's not. So we'll cut this rubber hose, and then we'll go to the other side and do the same thing. Cut the parking brake cable and the rubber brake line, and the axle's out of there. Then we'll get it the track bar, or the track bar removed. on the other side, on the passenger side, from the axle, so the axle could come out, and then we can finish up removing the rest of this bracketry. So it isn't terrible. I said it's just, it takes time, and you know, I'm trying to do it a little more cautiously than I normally would, and then doing the video, you know, along with it takes extra time. But we're getting there. Hopefully you're learning something.